Domain tools help security analysts turn threat data into threat intelligence. They take indicators from your network, including domains and IP addresses, and connect them with nearly every active domain on the internet. Those connections drive risk assessments, help profile attackers, guide online fraud investigations, and map cyber activity to attacker infrastructure. Fortune 1000 companies, global government agencies, and leading security solutions vendors use the Domain Tools platform as a critical ingredient in their threat investigations and proactive defenses. For more information, visit securityweekly.com/domain tools. The greatest threat to businesses today isn't the outsider trying to get in. It's the people you trust, the ones who already have the keys, your employees, your contractors, and privileged users. 60% of online attacks are carried out by insiders. To stop these insider threats, you need to see what users are doing before an incident occurs. Observit combats insider threats by detecting risk activity, investigating in minutes, effectively responding, and stopping data lost. Give it a test drive at observit.com/securityweekly. Are you looking for high-performance data storage that's easy to use yet secure enough for the Department of Defense? Look no further. Racktop Systems gives business software-defined data storage complete with embedded compliance, security, and data encryption. Don't let cyber threats, regulatory demands, or the complexity and growth of your data overwhelm your business. Racktop's high-performance data management platform gives you the tools you need to address the most demanding data challenges. Think beyond storage. To learn more, visit racktopsystems.com. Welcome, everyone. We are here at DEF CON in an updated and luxurious pool cabana.
We got upgraded today.
Yeah, we got upgraded. That was a nice touch.
Yeah,
I like that. I guess whoever was supposed to have this didn't want it, and now we have it.
Now we get it.
And now we get to talk about attack simulation, not stimulation. I don't know why in my head. It was a long night last night. But we're going to talk about attack simulation, which is one of my favorite new categories. Yeah. And I think it's one of my favorites because the messaging early on was one component, and John Strand and I kind of misunderstanding this market as it was emerging and it was new. We thought that they were trying to replace pen testing. And actually, to our credit, that was some of Safebreach's early messaging. Since then, I don't think it does not replace pen testing. I think it's a great supplement to pen testing.
Yeah, it kind of augments it, right?
Yeah, but I think it has some other values and benefits that are better than a penetration test in a lot of respects. And we'll go through that. What I like about this category, too, is I think that there's a very concise list of vendors that are providing this service. There's not too many that are like, well, I mean, there is kind of a dotted line to another category that we'll talk about, but I like the concise list of vendors. You got ThreatCare, Attack IQ, Verodin, Scythe, who is Grim and Crossbow that we did work with last year, so our listeners may recognize that. Bryson Bort was on the show talking about this space last year. He's rebranded that company, and it's now called Scythe. And I think he's getting ready to announce some kind of funding round.
Yeah,
there.
I think so.
I don't want to spoil it in case it's not.
Right.
We have a lot of inside information that we're going to make sure it doesn't leak out.
Right.
So we have to be careful what we say. But I think there is a pending funding round, and we won't disclose any more details as they'd be pure speculation at this point. I did a formal briefing with Safebreach. I don't know if you did. You didn't do any briefings.
I didn't do any in this space. This isn't my core space. This is more your segment than probably mine. It's, I don't have the broader pen testing background. We did track some of these vendors though when we were at Tenable. We did look at Verodin and Safebreach early on.
And I think we looked at the dotted line ones that try and do this with log and vulnerability analysis, which is kind of interesting. Ron could do that with the Tenable products.
Right.
And do an attack simulation. What did he call it? Attack path something.
Attack path simulation or something like that. I can't remember what it was.
But yeah. Called it attack paths. Now it's called attack or adversary simulation is the more like manual version of it, less automated.
But Red Seal, Skybox, Core Security, we're all doing kind of aspects of this, trying to overlay vulnerabilities on top of the network map to look for potential attack paths, pinch points in the network. This is another evolution of what was
attack simulation. My thinking of how we should define attack simulation is I'm actually infecting an endpoint, or I'm infecting an application, or I'm infecting a server with a simulated malware of some kind. Right? I mean, the more real the better.
Right. But it's not meant to cause harm. It's meant to cause that the path is there and that it's possible.
Benign malware.
Yeah, benign malware.
Is, I believe how Bryson framed that discussion, and I think that's very
just
very
phones
valuable.
home like, hello, world.
Yes. Yeah, it doesn't harm the systems, but it simulates that
attack and how that attack propagates.
And so when Bryson came on the show, he described it as basically, let's say there's a big company that gets breached, right? And they go out and they can go buy 50 products. When they implement those 50 products and they come out the other side of it, they're like, I don't know what's working and what's not.
Right.
Like, how do we test what is actually effective and what isn't? And this particular company Bryson described last year was basically saying that if you infect a system and do that it's going to help that company understand where their gaps are. And that's why they tasked Bryson with writing it. And when he wrote it, he was like, this could be a product.
Right.
I think Safebreach was already on the market at that point, probably.
Correct.
Veridian
was, I think, at that point as well.
ThreatCare was probably starting.
Yeah, starting. I think
now they do it a little
early.
different. They do a lot of JavaScript hooking, so you get a web browser and load some JavaScript, and they're able to do some attack simulation. That's what separates ThreatCare apart. They do have an agentless option. Although I like the agent-based option, I like just being able to infect, like air quotes, infect my hosts, and then testing my defenses, my processes, my tools, my techniques, the whole thing.
7 different endpoint agents actually doing what they're supposed to do? Or how many ever you have on your box?
Right.
Are my log collections collecting it? Is my SIM collecting that use case and alerting on when all those events happen and trigger, right? It's testing and validating all those controls you have in place to find out what's effective and what's not effective in that case.
I think at a very technical level, the differences will become apparent in how they infect a system, what they infect the system with, what they're using as droppers, payloads, and what they're executing.
Right.
And I think the gauge that I got in talking with people about this is that there's a claim that some vendors are really more on like the virtual side of it, and it's too much like a simulation and not enough like real malware. So I think there's a scale, and I'm not sure. I know that Scythe does a very good job of infecting it with actual malware because I've spoken with Bryson, but in terms of the other companies, I'm not sure how much of a simulation it is versus an actual attack.
Right. I think some of these vendors try to take a snapshot of the existing environment, replicate that as VMs, and then run the attack scenarios in that simulated VM world instead of doing it on the live network. And the question is that effective enough to really test out all of your other controls to make sure they're working correctly or not,
right?
Versus what Scythe seems to appear to be doing, which is we're doing it on your live network. We're just going to infect it with something benign, but we're going to test your defenses live.
So let's talk about Safebreach for a moment. I met with Guy Bejarano. He's a former Israeli Air Force. He led the Red Team. As many cybersecurity companies today come from Israeli Air Force or Israeli military background. He actually didn't start it right after. He was a CISO for a very large public company before he started Safebreach. He was first to market in 2014. I think that pretty much that puts him first to market, sure. Sequoia Capital B round for $15 million. PayPal also got in on the round and is also a customer, which I thought was kind of interesting. So, I mean, he's proven it with a very large customer like PayPal that has certainly a lot at stake.
Right.
I mean, they're a payment company.
Yep.
So he says that the number one differentiator in the market today is the number of simulators, which, as we know, can get watered down as time goes on. If we've seen in the vulnerability scanning market, it starts to become less about the number of checks that you have and more about
the quality of the checks
and how it fits in your network and fits in your process and the features that are applicable to you other than just the number of simulators. I think at this stage in the market, number of simulators is really important. If you don't have enough, you're going to leave too many gaps in your network, and why did you run the exercise in the first place? It's going to tell you you're secure when you're really, and your products are working when they may not be. So I think in this case, it is important at this stage in the market.
Yeah, but over time,
everyone's going to catch up, right?
Yeah, but it's what are the different scenarios, and are there different variations based on Windows versus Mac versus Linux versus containers versus Java, right? And so as you start to think about all the variations, then those variations will probably play a little more of a part here, just to make sure you're testing all the stuff that's in an enterprise organization effectively.
He also says the deployment model is interesting. He's got agents. He's got what he calls virtual stacks, where you drop a VM and it does some simulations for you.
Right.
He can also deploy in Docker or the cloud, which is kind of interesting as well.
Right.
I think on the network, to be able to deploy this with Docker is really super easy. I think the industry is really kind of behind how easy it is to spin things up. I mean, it's like one command and you got an application running.
Yeah.
And so this is a perfect use case.
So you bring it up, simulate the network, and then you can just spin it back down.
Yeah.
Very cost effective, yes.
And you can spin up multiple instances. There's a lot of capability there. So what he says the messaging is, and I think this is a really great statement, not just for Safebreach, but for the whole industry. And I wrote this down because I thought it summed it up nicely. He says, in attack simulation, you should be changing your strategy based on the reality that they're finding. So the simulation tools are discovering what the reality is of what your network is protected from or not.
Right.
And the important part of that statement is you have to change your strategy. So this is an iterative process, very similar to vulnerability management, I think, and configuration management, where your network is constantly changing, your systems are changing, your defenses are changing, and so you need to test it on an ongoing basis and adapt. He is targeting CISOs. I think this is very much a CISO level conversation that you need to be having. I think the practitioners have to be aware of the value, but I think the pitch has to be for the CISOs. I don't think there's a lot of other groups out there that you're going to be pitching with this technology other than CISOs. I mean, maybe operations. I don't know if it has a play.
Look, the CISO has to report his understanding of risk up to the board.
Right.
And so he owns the overall security budget, he or she, and looking at how they're doing against these, how effective their tools are, will allow the CISO to make not only...
How effective is your incident response process? I also think that has to play in here as well. It's one thing to do a tabletop. It's another thing to have an actual attack simulation running live on your network. I think this, in my mind, should eventually replace the tabletop. And I think all incident response exercises should be using some kind of live simulation.
So this gives the CISO the ability to understand the effectiveness. His overall risk posture. And where he's going to shift dollars from a budgeting perspective.
I mean, that's everything is being asked from the board, right? So, I mean, this is a total CISO play.
Kind of
for sure.
He's not going to run it, but...
no, the tech people are going to run it, and they're going to come up with new... You know, all these tools have some kind of API or a way for you to write your own simulation. So, if you see something cool in an attack on the internet, if you've got the skills to do that, you can build that attack into your simulator. So... he says another one of the things that they're working on is they've got open APIs that are tying into security orchestration and automation and response. I think that's the right integration to think of this technology. I almost think of it as like a DevOps process, right? You're just constantly pushing new simulations that's forcing constant identification of problems, that's forcing constant reaction from operations, developers, desktop folks, who firewall people, infrastructure people, wherever, and then you're rerunning that simulation again. I look at it as a very much push forward DevOps style process that you're just always doing to keep improving your security.
And if it's augmenting your incident response program, testing the effectiveness of it, the incident response teams are looking at the security orchestration automation tools as a way to make changes more proactively. So this augmenting it, that also makes logical sense that they can also be pushing some of those same changes proactively versus from the incident response side, making sure that the environment is much more secure based on the results of these simulations and attacks.
I think it'd be interesting to hear from our listeners as to which vendor you've chosen and why.
Who they're using.
Because I don't really have a solid recommendation. I think it may come down to different strokes for different folks. It may depend on a number of factors, including the complexity of your architecture, the skill set of your team, the resources that you have. I mean, what do you think what's the barrier to or the lowest bar, or like how tall do I need to be to ride the ride for attack simulation? I got to have some security solutions in place, and I got to have some process to test.
Some process and some people, right? So obviously the larger enterprises are going to have the staff to do it. Then that's where maybe, service folks fit into play here, right? We talked a little bit about that before.
This could be done as a managed service if you don't have, if you're trying to build a defensive architecture, right, for security, and you don't have the resources to implement this on your own. I can see this being a strong MSSP play. For that, for that mid-market,
a managed attack simulation type service. Where they're doing it on your behalf and providing that constant feedback.
Now there are companies like TrustedSec that offer what they call adversary simulation, which Carlos Perez from our team actually leads the research team for that. And basically they're coming up with what real-world attacks look like. And it's a human team implementing that on your network. They're persisting for something like 6 months as an example, and then giving a report of saying how they did it and how long they were able to persist. This greatly automates the process, and I think, again, is more like a DevOps style. I think I'd still do an adversary simulation if I wanted that specialized testing or felt I needed that specialized testing. If I felt like there were some gaps in my program or the stakes are just high enough where I'm like, okay, once a year I'm going to do this adversary simulation and put a human behind it and really truly understand where some of my gaps might be. So I would still do that. And that's not every organization. The stakes have to be high enough. Right?
It's going to be your financial institutions, anybody dealing with
payment
PII data, healthcare. Those are where the stakes are really high, where doing these on a more regular basis probably make a lot more sense.
So we're going to spend some more time with some of the vendors and test out some of their technology. I know a couple of them have pledged to give us a demo, let us test it out. So it's definitely something I want to spend more time with because I think it likely will become a category that's going to be a line item on everyone's budget as we move forward. Even if you're not buying a lot of security products, you've still got a lot of processes that should have security embedded, DevOps being one of them, right? So like testing these processes is never going to go away. I think it's going to become more important. I think this nicely plays into that constant feedback loop, right? As I change infrastructure, there's something telling me on a constant basis that I made a mistake or I opened up a vulnerability.
Especially as you're moving infrastructure from on-premise to cloud to multi-cloud.
Are you saying that's
moving away from?
That's how we got hacked once.
Right.
That's exactly how we got hacked once.
We moved the environment.
We moved the infrastructure and missed configuration.
Exactly right.
I mean, fortunately,
and there's a lot of that going on. You're moving away from, legacy apps to containerized microservice-based apps that are highly distributed. There's a lot of potential holes in these new architectures that you have to validate against.
It's awesome. It's a great space. I'm excited to see it mature, even in the past year. So, even though Safebreach has been at it since 2014. So, one of the, I think, the more interesting categories in my mind to cover on the show.
There you go.
So, alrighty. That concludes this segment.
Thank you for watching this interview from Las Vegas. If you want to watch and learn more, go to securityweekly.com/summercamp18 or go to our YouTube channel Security Weekly to view the playlist.